nails, all archaeological pieces that were dug up here.
Wow.
Every nail was kept. Once you go down there, the next room is all bones that were dug up.
Wow.
Now, why I brought everyone up here is that personal story. So, in the 1970s, the Chapel Saint-Louis burnt. If you went up the little ladder there and looked in above the chapel, all the timbers are still charred. So up there was an electrical fire, it burnt. So my father was in charge of cleaning these rooms because there was a lot of soot and smoke damage. So he was up here and he was taking articles from this room, putting them over to that room so he could scrub this room and then move them all back. So he's working somewhere in here, and out of the corner of his eye, he catches something out of the corner of his eye. Here it's a ball of beeswax about yay big, going into that room. Just floating into the room. So he thought, okay, fumes got to me, I'm going downstairs and have a smoke. So he goes outside, and another co-worker, Don Tryon actually, and came along and looked at Dad, and he's like, is there something wrong? Because I guess he was white as a ghost, pardon the pun. And they come up here. So they came up here to find out what was going on. So the ball of wax was over on a table in that room. So they went and they picked the ball of wax up, and underneath the wax was dirt, soot from the fire. So the wax had just been placed there after the fire. The only mark on the ball of beeswax was where Don picked it up with his fingers. There were no other marks on the ball of beeswax. No soot was taken off. They come over here and they see the exact spot on the table where the ball of beeswax was sitting. So it moved roughly 40 or 50 feet without anybody touching it. So everybody's like, oh no, I'm scared of ghosts, I'm scared of ghosts. This ghost was actually just helping him do his work.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just one personal story I have. The only other thing that ever happened to me didn't happen to me in this building, because I've worked here for 19 years. I worked in curatorial. I've been in these buildings by myself, setting them up. The only time I ever heard something, I've never seen something, was in the Douaget house, of course. And I was on the second floor, hanging drapes in the window, and I heard footsteps up on the third floor in the attic. So I looked upstairs, and there's only one door in, one door out, and the padlock was still on that door locked, so nobody could be inside. So I just continued to hang up my drapes because they were locked behind a door. And that's the only thing that has ever happened to me up here. I've also been up in this attic working, and the power go out, and this place is dark. No flashlight, no nothing. It was before cell phones anyway, and I didn't have a cell phone, so no light. So I'm actually feeling my way along the walls to get out.
Wow.
Any questions? Any personal stories from those that worked on site for a while, like in the restaurant, or
Just hearing stuff.
just hearing stuff like what, Ann?
A chair moving, or people walking, doors, like the locker doors open and closed, just hearing stuff. Not seeing anything, just hearing.
Just hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other things that people have seen, I'll talk about a few things here because I don't think we really want to walk around in the rain out here. So, the place that a lot of stories come out of is Captain Douaget's residence. Everybody says it's the most haunted place in the fortress. And what I find interesting is when the stories from people, and they don't even actually work here all the time, match the history of the place that they're at. There was one time we were doing a ghost tour at night during one of the encampments, so we were staying out here overnight. We're going around. We took the corner at the Douaget house, and one of the girls with us bolted. She left. She wasn't coming back. Found her I went and found her, and she was crying. And I'm like, what did you see? What happened? And she wouldn't say at first, but I convinced her to say so. And she said, I saw a woman in a chair holding a dead baby. Just so happens that Captain Douaget and his wife could never have children. She had a bunch of stillborns, miscarriages, so on and so forth. Another story that I had, it was during the 2008 Grand Encampment. The volunteer militia was staying in the Chevalier House, and we have a couple members in the volunteer militia from Halifax. And the next day, the woman was saying she had a great conversation with this man, and she didn't recognize the uniform. And these are reenactors, and they're around uniforms all the time. So she described the uniform, and it's like, okay, nobody around here is wearing that uniform. And she described it, and it was the exact description of what would have been a member of the Carrera Regiment, the 150 Swiss and German mercenaries that were here during the First Siege of Louisbourg. But nobody at the time was wearing a Carrera Regiment uniform. So I did a little bit of reading, and Madame Chevalier actually billeted 2 rooms to 2 of the members of the Carrera Regiment in that house.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Would she have had any historical knowledge of?
None whatsoever.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, that's.
So that's
That's
when
yeah.
it's really interesting, is when the person that's telling you the story would not have any historical knowledge whatsoever.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Another story, the most recent one actually, was when the excavation on the mass graves out at Rochefort Point that I mentioned, the New England graves, was happening. One of our workers at the restaurant actually was walking through the Dauphin Gate, and said she saw a couple of the soldiers down there. This was early in the morning. She walked in for exercise every day, and said hello to them and walked by, and they didn't say anything back. But the thing is, nobody else was on site from the military at the time. We wouldn't have had anybody in costume down there.
Wow.
She was wondering why they were being rude.
I would understand.
Exactly.
Wow.
So we do have a lot of stories in that, and a lot of instances that things happen. And it comes from, a lot of them come from certain people. Apparently, if you really believe, or certain people can see or hear more stuff than others. I ended up getting a lot of ghost stories from my father. They actually lived on site for a couple of years in the caretaker's residence right next to the McLennan Center where we were. So he lived in that building along with my mother and my brother, who works here as well.
Yeah.
And he ended up getting a lot of stories. Any questions?